Hi, I'm Charleen Justice with the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I'm here with Jim Fadiman to discuss his latest book, Microdosing, Why It Is So Popular and How Much of What Is Believed Is True. So what can you tell us about microdosing?
Well, it's really nice to be here and magically also to be here. And I'm really grateful for both. So microdosing is so popular that we are not able to keep up anymore. And if you kind of, when people say, well, how many people are microdosing because we have no way of counting? Well, Reddit has a subreddit called Microdosing. It's got close to 300,000 people who regularly talk about microdosing. If you go to Zoom and say, search the word microdosing, this year, last couple of years, it's like 3 million searches.
On Google.
And here's a bigger number. RAND Corporation, not known for their psychedelic work, did a research study and said 8 million people in 2023 took psilocybin.
That's a lot of people.
Which is interesting. 4 million of the 8 were microdosing.
Wow.
Okay, exactly. That was just the right answer. So it's out there, and if I asked you how many of you have microdosed, a lot of the hands would go up. And if I also said, and I won't, if all the MAPS staff will just close their eyes for a moment, and now how many of you are microdosing right now, we would have a number of hands, okay? So it's not only popular, it clearly allows you to function just fine. And what we're seeing is it does a lot more than that, that it really is a potential shift in what's possible with psychedelics. And that's really why we're here, and that's why I was asked to present.
That's awesome. So I know that there's, I personally have microdosed and it's changed my life. It's been incredibly beneficial for me. But there's always that element of like, is this placebo or is this the real deal?
The placebo issue is a wonderful one. It's pretty much now over because we have the hardest data, which is brainwave data, from the kind of institutions that publish that stuff. So, but let's tell you the problem. The problem is it is possible to design a study which will show almost no effect. It isn't easy, but people have done it. And the way you do it is you start with only healthy people. You give them tasks that don't interest them, and you then aggregate your data. And if you're really being sly, you, quote, get rid of the outliers. Those are the interesting people on both ends. That's one way to look at it. What I'm looking at is a very different kind of information. And let me just give you something from yesterday's mail. Jordan and I, who did the book, have a site called microdosingbook.com. And people, we say, if you have an interesting story, let us know. So let me tell you, and I'm going to read some of it. This is from a woman who's 65, and her training is in hospice and palliative care. And at age 65, she volunteered to do work in Africa on a medical mission, hospice and palliative care in Africa, okay? Then she says, shortly after my return from Tasmania, I had a major anaphylactic reaction to the malaria medication I'd been taking. And I ended up on the wrong side of the bed, not as a nurse, but in the ICU. I recovered and was sent home, but I had persistent, profound fatigue, brain fog, muscle aches, rashes, and I began having allergic type reactions to many foods and medications. Okay, so that's who she is. And she's also gets all of the best Western medicine that she's been trained in with no real improvement. Later on in her discussion, she says, I owe psilocybin mushrooms a thank you for helping me reset my body, mind, and spirit. For me, the brain fog immediately lifted with a focus and clarity that I'd been missing, and the fatigue muscle pain, allergic reactions, and skin rashes resolved with less intensity and more minimal reactions. Now, it's hard for me to worry about placebo when those are the kinds of stories we've been getting and I've been getting for the last 12 years. There's also another group of researchers that do what's called expectancy theory. That's you will get results that you expect. It's the way we run our lives, which is your friend tells you this restaurant has a terrific such and such. You go, you're expecting it to be good. It may or may not be good, but you start with positive expectations. Everyone who goes as a volunteer for a psychedelic experiment has positive expectations. Of course, it's part of it. But this nurse and hundreds of other cases are very different. So much for a certain kind of research, and it probably will continue because it's really easy to do. The other problem, of course, and many of you know this, is double blind, which is God's answer to research for the last decade, doesn't work really well for psychedelics. Even if you're using a microdose, what you get is the people in the placebo, about half of them guess microdose, which is perfect for double blind. If you ask the people who've gotten the microdose, 95% immediately know it's a microdose, that they're on the drug. So let's put those aside, and we'll look at some other research perhaps as we go on.
That's awesome. What was your favorite thing that you discovered when you were writing this book?
The thing that blew Jordan and I away over and over is, why could it be that psilocybin and LSD both have effects across an amazing number of conditions? Mental health conditions, physical health conditions, and just better functioning conditions. And Professor Nutt, who is at the conference, gave us this wonderful comment that anything that seems to help a whole lot of things should be viewed with suspicion. And we like that so much, it's one of the headings for our chapter. But it depends on what lens you're looking through. If you're looking through the psychopharmacology lens, where it's symptom, 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 condition, 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 different medications for each, then it makes very little sense that something's good for a lot of things. But if you come from the other side and say, what if microdosing has only one effect? It improves the functioning of the physical, mental, spiritual system, period. And then the question is, well, you're saying it's kind of good for everything? And I said, no. There's nothing that's good for everything, right? Well, maybe. How about exercise? Is that good for everything? Yeah. How about sleep? Is that good for everything? Well, yeah. How about improving your diet? Is that good for everything? Well, of course. How about having good relationships and so forth? There's a whole lot of things that are pretty good for everything. So if you look at microdosing as something that enhances physical and mental and capacity, it's closer to those groups than to all these kind of detailed kind of medical physical conditions. There are very few specializations in the microdose world.
That's really fascinating, and I can see it, or laying it out that way. I was sort of wondering, do you have any like concerns, or is there any like risks?
Sure. What are the downsides?
Yeah.
What I like to think of is a kind of risk-reward ratio. What's the risk of microdosing, and what are the possible rewards? Now, we know, and you all know, that high doses are somewhat high risk and really high reward. And the somewhat high risk is why we have psychedelically supported, etc., psychotherapy, PTSD, etc., with trained staff, preparation, integration, and follow-up. Now, that's because we all know that what goes wrong in high doses almost always goes wrong either when you're alone or with people that don't know what you or they are doing.
Set in setting.
set and setting are very fundamental to high doses. Microdoses are almost without concern because they fit into your normal life. People will get up, they'll have a microdose, they'll have breakfast, they'll be nice with their family, they'll go to their work. During the day, they will notice that they're feeling comfortable, a little better mood than usual. Probably they'll be nice to someone at work that doesn't need, that doesn't quite deserve it. People may come back, go to the gym, they'll see nothing different except, well, I did another set of reps than I usually do. And I've had a very good day, meaning they're functioning better. The risk, so far, it's a problem because people feel, particularly media, feel almost desperate that you should have some negative side effects. And there are negative side effects. And I'm thinking now of I think it was a Polish study that listed all these side effects, which mainly are headaches, a little bit of nausea, some achy limbs. And they said, these are all transient and don't affect the overall use. So they let you know that you've taken something that has more than psilocybin in it, because most of these people are taking mushrooms. But that's it. So we're running so far something with minimal risk. Again, at minimal risk like vitamin C. Can you harm yourself with vitamin C? Sure. Does it take a lot? Yes. What are the chances of you're hurting yourself with one healthy vitamin C? Is very small. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're looking at, is really a different framework. We're finding that certain things taken in low enough doses have almost no physiological measurable effects. They definitely affect brain functioning. They definitely affect pain receptors and other things, but they don't get you in trouble. So, in fact, rule of thumb is, how do you know when you've taken too much of a microdose? Well, you're feeling a little bit too good, a little bit maybe like you're starting to come on. You're not as interested in the task you were working on. In fact, you really are letting yourself drift a little. That's called, in the microdose world, that's called an overdose. Okay? And it's still way, way below what a high dose looks like. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing is it's as safe as anything we know, and nothing is perfectly safe. And for some people, they'll take a super low dose, at least in our world, like 1/10 of a gram, which is what we consider a low starting dose of psilocybin mushroom. And they said it's too much, it's too strong. And someone wrote to Reddit, remember all those 100,000 people, said, hey, I've been trying 1/10 of a gram and it's way too much, so I've been taking 100th of a gram. And it sounds like what you guys are all reporting. Has anyone else ever had that experience? And 20, 30 people within a day say, yeah, me too.
Hypersensitivity.
Because they're sensitive. Mm-hmm. And so what people do with a microdose is they test it on themselves, low to start, below what you think will even manifest, and then work your way up until you get to a place where it feels like you're getting the results that you came in for. So for instance, say you're taking it for migraine headaches. Remarkable. It will not cure migraine headaches. But in most of the people who report, it lowers the frequency of migraine headaches 80-90%, and it lowers the intensity. So if you're taking the right dose and your migraines are almost gone, that's the right dose. If you take more, you will get outside of the microdose range and you'll have no effects. If you go too low, you'll have no effects. It's a little bit the way you serve yourself ice cream. I'll just have a spoonful. No, give me another scoop. Both people are having the right dose, okay?
You just need to dial it in.
Right, you dial it in, exactly. Yeah.
So do you think that maybe in your lifetime or in the lifetime of your daughters, that there may be a world where a physician would prescribe microdosing I know that like Oregon has the therapeutic use and Colorado has, they're starting to do this. But do you think that like it would start to become part of like, like you said, like a healthy diet, eating, exercising, sleeping, like that would be socially embraced?
Well,
in the future?
see, the thing is, it's illegal, and 8 million people took psilocybin last year. Since the United States made psychedelics illegal and bullied a lot of other countries to follow them, 40 to 50 million Americans only have taken either LSD or psilocybin. So the word illegal is a kind of curious word because it prevents research from being published, it prevents commercial work, it prevents standardization, it prevents purity from being found. So even with all those things missing, it's become more and more used. And the people who are using it, like you said it and I said it, some of them become legislators. Some of them become FDA employees. And what I'm seeing when I now deal with any group of professionals is the number of people who have had high doses is growing, and the number of people who are microdosing and not ever touching a high dose is growing faster. It's very hard to find a medical student who hasn't tried a psychedelic, not necessarily in medical school, usually way before. So we're in a funny world, and actually what people don't know is during Prohibition, when the United States said thou shalt not drink alcohol, except incredibly widely and illegally, and only in high proof, Times Square had 5 times the number of places you could get a drink during Prohibition as it had before. So that's a poison. Okay, this is something that makes you feel better and makes you enjoy your kids more, allows you to be creative for longer periods of time, and seems to turn around a lot of conditions for which there at the moment isn't very much medical help. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly old, and I think I'm still going to be here when it gets a lot more legal. Colorado is leading the nation in finding out if there's going to be any problems. Oregon is kind of shilly-shallying around it, but also finding out there's no problems. In Holland, it's been legal for a couple of decades, and I don't even know of any research that says, negative effects of Holland. Czechoslovakia just decided that medical psychedelics were available. Microdosing kind of tags along. A lot of the rules don't mention it because it's like ubiquitous. Just like it's doesn't make enough of a wave, and it hasn't attracted enough venture capital, so that people are needing legislation. Mm-hmm. You can't grow LSD. It's a tough synthesis. Now, you make a gram, that's 10 to 20,000 doses, so it's interesting. But if I were investing, I would not invest in microdose companies. I would invest in grow kits. Because what you need to grow psilocybin mushrooms is a drawer in your dresser, a shelf in your closet. So it's a good question, and it looks like it will slide into being used, and then the legislation will follow. Similar, the research, when Jordan and I started writing the book about 4 years ago, we used to say, and quoting everyone else, there's very little research about microdosing at the moment, but there's a lot of interesting experiences. By the time we finished the book, we have, I guess, 80, 90, 100 references. Why did that research happen? Because people had personal experiences, and some of them, their personal experiences were in a medical setting, in a psychiatric setting, in a dental setting. So these were people who were professionals. And so it has become there's more newspaper articles about it that simply say, hey, this is what happened when I microdosed.
It's becoming more normalized.
More normalized, thank you.
And
Much better
integrated
word.
into society.
Yeah, normalized before legalized.
Mm-hmm.
And curiously, normalized before researchized.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is research, I used to say, what we're doing in the microdose world is called search. We find out stuff that nobody knows. Research is when you compile enough of that so you can justify doing the research thing on it. You have to remember, research comes out of two things: personal interest of the researcher and the ability of the researcher and their institution to get grants. Microdosing precedes that, but it gives the researcher a pretty easy route to doing research that will be published, sensible, and make a difference.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you would like everyone to know that we haven't touched on?
Well, the reason we wrote a rather large book is because there's so many conditions that we found microdosing was helping people. That one of the reasons that we're continuing our work, and people like this wonderful woman report in, is we don't know the full dimensions of microdosing, because we don't know the full dimensions of what improved health can do. I mean, improved health, for example, one of the two major uses. One, students. Why are students giving up Adderall for microdosing? Because it does a lot of what Adderall does, which is improve focus, etc. It does not do what Adderall does, which is crashes, addiction, and high expense. So these are the two competing models at the moment. And again, normalization is happening. So when a student writes us and says, I used to get B's, now I get A's. My favorite is a martial artist who said, I used to get silvers, now I get gold. Okay? It's like, how much research are you going to need to demonstrate to people who don't know anything about martial arts that what he just said was a remarkable thing? So what I would like people to get is trust your own experience, look up information. The reason we wrote a book is so that people would have an easy way of finding the answers to long questions. Double-blind, placebo, does it work for, say, multiple sclerosis? Take a look at the section. We have some long sections on very important things. What we know about high doses is they are really good for depression for a while. What we know about microdoses is approximately the same percentage of people in the depression research studies that microdosed improve as in the high dose studies. So what's the difference between the two studies? Time, cost, risk. They're different. So look at the research, whatever level of research you think is important. Look at your friends' experiences, clock your own experiences, and share what you know. Almost all of the last 12 years of my life, I have been getting letters like this one that you just heard from people who report to help other people what happened for them. My favorite at the moment is a word that I'm guessing 10% of you might know, misophonia, okay? Everyone I've talked to, like me, looked it up. It means fear of noise, okay? What's the treatment for it? There is none. What is it, okay? It's upset, being triggered by, disturbed by small, repetitive noises.
I have it.
The most common is people next to you chewing their food. The problem is you can't be in a social world if when someone is sitting next to you, like your mother or your friend, chewing, and you get frightened or angry. Literally, people with misophonia will go and eat with headphones on, okay? We have just a case that we're following at the moment who said, I tried everything and there wasn't much to try, and microdosing has helped my misophonia. That's what I'm asking you to do is share your experiences and let us know how we can help.
That's awesome. So the real questions I think now are, how can people get your book, contribute to, sharing their stories? Like, in what ways do you recommend? I know when I very first discovered you in 2017,
Yep.
I had been diagnosed with premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and I came across an article that said microdosing psilocybin may keep PMDD at bay. And I had done mushrooms before, and I was thinking, this doesn't really make sense. It was long before I started working at MAPS also, but, I actually ended up volunteering later that year, but I came across microdosing psychedelics.com, and I was looking in some Facebook support groups and that kind of stuff. And I started kind of looking into the papers, looking at the research on clinicaltrials.gov, and using Google Scholar to sort of, decipher. And then I started the protocol, and I was reporting to a system that you have. Do you still have that?
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and how are you?
My life is completely different than it was.
Okay.
I can't express how much microdosing has helped me.
Well, I should mention that the condition that you had is characterized by a high suicide rate.
Yeah, 30% of the people who have it attempt to or successfully do commit suicide.
Yeah. So that's why it's kind of hard for me to fuss about the question of placebo, because I was certainly not planning to out you, but Charleen is really one of my heroes. Okay, I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for Charleen for sharing what she did. And a couple of years later, I get another letter from a woman who was a nutritionist in Europe with a similar story. And I've been talking with both of you women on and off, because that's really, so that's answer to my question is, Charleen just changed the nature of what is open and available for people with a condition with a 30% suicide rate. That's worth paying attention. So that's all I'm suggesting is we're in a flux period. It's quite possible that the federal government, in its infinite chaos, is going to move quickly ahead on moving psychedelics forward. And microdosing is going to come with them. So we're going to open this very soon to your questions. And I should warn you that a question is a single sentence with maybe one or two clauses, and it ends with a little question mark, okay? And it never starts, even in this conference, with saying, well, before I can ask you my question, I've got to tell you about my experience. It doesn't begin that way. And we will be open to questions, and Charleen is going to help me with the questions when I don't hear them quite as well as you do. And let's see where we go from here. And thank you very much for coming and for being at this conference and for being the kind of person who goes to such a conference and makes it work.
Thank you. And thank you for all your work. Thanks.